Well, thank you so much. I really want to thank Hillary and Suzanne and Restore America's Estuaries. I've been really impressed with the work that you've been doing and the network of partners that you bring together. So I hope that our Federal Highway Administration work is a helpful contribution to the very important and growing field of living shorelines and nature-based solutions. So what I'm going to talk about today is a project that I was the lead for at the Federal Highway Administration. And this project was called Nature-Based Solutions for Coastal Highway Resilience. First, by way of background, this work fell under our resilience work. We have in our current strategic plan for the U.S. Department of Transportation that DOT will increase its effectiveness in ensuring that infrastructure is resilient enough to withstand extreme weather. So we have been working on the topic of resilience on adapting our transportation network to impacts of sea level rise and changes in precipitation patterns for many years. But I just wanted to stress that that's still an important consideration in our latest strategic plan. One of the techniques that we've used a lot is to partner with state and local organizations. You can see from this map that we've funded a bunch of pilot projects looking at vulnerability assessments and resilience options. We've also developed a lot of reports and guidance on how to improve resilience of transportation assets. However, we realized that most of our work up until a couple of years ago had focused primarily on structural solutions. So things like armoring highway embankments with rock revetments, shown at the top left here, or using different materials, or widening culverts, or raising roads. We had not done much work yet on nature-based solutions, looking at how we could mimic nature, use natural materials to reduce flooding and erosion impacts in order to protect highways in that manner. So especially given that we saw that our partners, U.S. Army Corps of Engineers and NOAA, were advocating a systems-based approach where the idea is to look comprehensively at structural solutions, nature-based solutions, and policy or non-structural solutions, to look at those in conjunction with one another. We very much wanted to follow their lead and provide some good information targeted to transportation agencies on how they can use nature-based solutions. So that was the genesis for this project. The first thing that we did under this project was to fund 5 pilots in different states. With Oregon, Maine, and New Hampshire did one jointly, Mississippi, Delaware, and then we partnered with the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers on one in New Jersey. And for each of these pilots, the pilot project looked at a particular vulnerable stretch of highway and looked at what opportunities there might be to implement a nature-based solution to protect that section of highway and also have additional environmental and other benefits. So those pilot project reports are up on our website, and I'd encourage you to take a look. We also, as part of this project, developed a white paper in order to put some of the great information that's been developed by academics and other federal partners, nonprofits, and others, to put that information into the context of transportation agencies and provide some good background and get people up to speed on how this might be helpful from a transportation perspective. Then after that, we held 4 regional peer exchanges in coastal areas across the country, and that was a great opportunity to bring together transportation practitioners along with coastal resource managers and others to have a dialogue and conversation about how we could work together. And also, very importantly, to get information from the transportation practitioners on what they would like to see in terms of an implementation guide from Federal Highway Administration, what would be most important to them. And so we used that information to develop the implementation guide, which is the culminating product of this project. I'd also like to note that a lot of the great research and findings from the implementation guide have been incorporated into the update of our HEC 25, which is Hydraulic Engineering Circular 25. And so that's very important that we're incorporating this into our standard engineering guidance to give to our state and local partners. So here is a screenshot of the cover of the implementation guide. I'm very pleased that it is available online. You can click that link and download your very own copy. The intent of the implementation guide is to provide transportation practitioners with relevant, timely, and science-based guidance regarding the complete project implementation process for nature-based solutions. It has a number of technical fact sheets, which you can pull out of the guide and use as good, one-pagers that has some summary information on typical nature-based techniques. It also has information on benefits and typical costs, because we heard at our peer exchanges that that was very important to transportation agencies. And then it follows the process of how one would go about implementing a nature-based solution as part of a highway project. So the types of nature-based solutions that we're talking about here are things that use natural materials and processes to reduce erosion, wave damage, and flood risk. So we're talking about restored marsh, restored dunes, beach nourishment, oyster reef, coral reefs, etc. And I am preaching to the choir here, so I don't need to go over much the benefits, but I will note that in the implementation guide, I think we've done a really good job of summarizing the literature and pulling together in quite a compelling way all of these wonderful benefits that come with nature-based solutions. So in addition to providing that reduction in coastal flooding, wave heights, and erosion, it goes through and talks about the ecological, water quality, habitat benefits, natural adaptation ability, tourism and recreation benefits, other things that transportation agencies are aware that the communities they serve are interested in. So these technical fact sheets, which are right up front, provide a nice description of different nature-based techniques, what they look like, and they have some examples of, preferably like transportation examples. So this one here is Project Green Shores in Pensacola. So you can see offshore breakwaters there, restored marsh, and then you see the roadway in the background, which is protected from flooding and erosion due to that nature-based solution. Here's another example from one of those technical fact sheets. You'll see we included equations because our audience consists of civil engineers, hydraulic engineers. They like equations, so we put them in there. Again, you can see the information for this one. This is on dune restoration. There's a picture here from North Carolina Outer Banks, the dune restoration protecting the roadway. Pocket beaches. This example here shows Water Street in Yorktown, Virginia. And back in the 1990s, the local government there worked to do restoration of the beach area there. And the Virginia Department of Transportation also contributed funding to this Pocket Beach project because the project provides flood and erosion protection to Water Street. So they had an interest in it as well. So after some upfront information on benefits and costs, and I haven't said much on costs, but I should say that the contractor who developed this implementation guide for us did a really good job of going through the literature and compiling tons of information on cost data from the literature and doing spreadsheet manipulation and coming up with average, low, and high costs for different types of solutions. So there's a lot of good information in there, but it doesn't lend itself well to a PowerPoint presentation. So after the info on benefits and costs and those technical fact sheets, it follows what you would do, the process you would use for implementing a nature-based solution, starting with planning and funding. So in the transportation world, we have a federally mandated transportation planning process. And so all transportation projects in the US that are receiving federal highway and federal transit administration funding have to follow this transportation planning process. So in the implementation guide, we recommend that as part of that planning process, you consider nature-based solutions. And that will address both resilience objectives and environmental objectives, which you should already be considering in the planning process according to our federal regulations. Another advantage of considering nature-based solutions in the planning process is that it allows for systematic consideration. As you know, nature-based solutions are most effective when they are larger in scope and cited appropriately. So this that's why we recommend this consideration of the planning process. Can also help you mobilize larger projects and take advantage of analyses by partners, such as the analyses that I'm sure some of the folks on the phone here have taken part in. This is just one example of an analysis that a transportation agency could take advantage of. The guide also has information on funding opportunities. Because what we're talking about crosses three areas: transportation, coastal restoration, and hazard mitigation. That opens up three different funding pots. So from the transportation standpoint, activities to protect highways from flooding, erosion, and climate impacts are eligible for Federal Highway Administration funding. Generally, under our large formula programs, Federal Highway Administration funding is about $40 billion per year. And we have a memo clarifying that resilience activities are eligible. So generally, nature-based solutions would be eligible, although of course transportation agencies have many competing projects. A lot more projects than they have funding for. Then there's the coastal restoration pot and the hazard mitigation funding pot. So the next chapter in the implementation guide is on site assessment. And so selecting an appropriate nature-based solution requires at least two critical steps: site characterization and resilience characterization. The process of site characterization allows you to identify and better understand the conditions of the site. Examples of site conditions include erosion rate, tide range, water depth, salinity. The guide goes into detail about how to analyze these. And then it also provides information on typical vulnerabilities for highways, and does some matching up of, given these particular site assessment characteristics, and the particular resilience needs of your highway, here are some different solutions that you might want to consider. So it has some nice tables in that section, which would be helpful. The next chapter is on design. And while transportation agencies will likely hire a coastal engineer for this step, it's still important for the transportation practitioner to understand the steps in order to properly oversee the work, as well as the broader considerations. So the implementation guide dives into design considerations for addressing both the engineering and ecological needs of the nature-based solution. So for example, considerations include structure design for coastal protection, connectivity effects on nearby habitats, and how to design elements to facilitate monitoring and maintenance. The chapter also includes lessons learned like those highlighted on this slide. Since nature-based solutions require knowledge of multiple fields, and they are also quite site-specific and scenario-specific, it's very important to involve not only transportation professionals for the highway element, but to involve coastal engineers who can understand the forces in engineering design, and coastal scientists who can understand the ecology and what's likely to be successful in that area. So it requires a close partnership between three distinct disciplines. In the design chapter, we also have a number of case studies and examples. While we were developing the implementation guide, it just so happened that our division office, the Federal Highway Administration, has a division office in each of the states. And the division office in Alabama approached me and said, hey, we have this project that Alabama Department of Transportation is working on. They're replacing part of the Mobile Bay Causeway, this bridge segment of the causeway, and they need to do realignment. There's an existing seawall there, and when they're doing their bridge replacement and new alignment, perhaps there's an opportunity to put in a nature-based solution instead of a seawall. And could you help us analyze this? And so I said, of course, we would love to. So the contractor went down and did an analysis of the area and developed a conceptual design for a nature-based solution. So on this slide, you'll see the lines indicating the new alignment, which is basically a shift waterward a little bit. And then the conceptual design includes rock revetment. So they determined that because of the long fetch in Mobile Bay, you would still need a rock revetment. But then in addition to that, it has marsh planting in front of that and then offshore breakwaters. And the advantages of this design are many. So because you have this offshore breakwater and then this gradual slope for the planted marsh, you do not need this larger rock revetment to protect the highway. So you can remove that stone area in red, and so then that saves you money. And the cost of that is essentially the same, roughly, to the cost of the offshore breakwater. And then another nice thing is that when we went ahead and talked to the Army Corps of Engineers district office to say, okay, since this, could we get some credit for compensatory mitigation because we would be creating some wetlands here? And they said, in concept, yes, you know, obviously they would have to go through the details, but being able to get some credit for compensatory mitigation would mean that Alabama DOT would not need to go to an environmental coastal wetlands mitigation bank and pay for mitigation for a certain number of acres. Instead, they would be creating the marsh there, and that would serve as their mitigation for their project. So when you account for all of that, this design, this project would essentially pay for itself. So this was a neat concept. Now, unfortunately, there were some other considerations and timing considerations, and so this is not going forward at this time. But Alabama DOT is interested in pursuing potentially a similar type of approach on other projects in the future. And it gives a nice example that other transportation agencies could be interested in. This is an example from the Great Lakes region because I wanted to stress that the guidance was for all coastal areas, including the Great Lakes areas. So this example is from Marysville, Michigan, and this is a nature-based solution that protects and is a segment of Interstate 94. It's a wetland shelf with stone toe protection. The next chapter after the design chapter is on permitting, everyone's favorite topic. There's a lot of ins and outs when it comes to permitting, and so the guide steps people through it, explaining the different types of permits, the different federal and state regulations that apply, and different options for pursuing the permitting process. It also recommends early and frequent engagement with the permitting agencies. The next chapter is on construction. It provides information to transportation agencies who are used to doing construction all the time, but since these projects are a little different, there are some considerations that they would not be used to, such as knowing to time the project for the right season for best oyster recruitment or best marsh plant growth. It also has information on land-based versus water-based construction and information on procurement, such as the potential for performance-based contracts to be helpful in allowing innovation in construction techniques, and also allowing potentially, if you want to do a performance-based contract, to include the monitoring and maintenance requirements as well. It provides information on typical steps for nature-based solutions construction. And then we move on to the monitoring, maintenance, and adaptive management chapter, which many people had stressed to us was critically important. So in this chapter, we go over how to measure and assess project performance and impacts. We have information on performance metrics, and then in the appendix, a table of different performance metrics. We also have information on how to conduct maintenance in order to ensure that the nature-based solution can continue to provide the expected benefits. So for example, here's some quick information on preventive marsh maintenance, typical things that you would need to do. And then we have information on implementing adaptive management practices and some examples of how to respond over time as conditions change, as sea level rises, as there may be unanticipated impacts and how you might adapt to that. So that's the summary of the implementation guide. I wanted to close with this slide here because I've been very privileged through this project to work with some very talented individuals from our Army Corps of Engineers, from NOAA, from state departments of transportation, from nonprofit organizations, academics, and I should mention that we had representatives of each of those groups that I just mentioned serving on a technical review panel, which helped guide the development of the implementation guide. And so I'm very grateful to them for their key contributions. This was actually the member of the technical review panel from the Army Corps of Engineers was talking to me and saying, hey, wouldn't it be cool if we got a landscape architect to do a design and show conceptually what a nature-based solution for a coastal highway could look like, incorporating a lot of the elements that we've been talking about. So he worked with some professionals and came up with this image, which I really liked. So in the upper right-hand corner, you can see a typical highway section that's exposed to flooding impacts, and then the main picture here shows, perhaps Army Corps of Engineers needs to maintain that channel by dredging it, and then they have extra sediment that they can use for beneficial reuse and build up some marsh there to absorb some floodwaters and protect the upland community from erosion. Then you have some native shrub plantings. You have a greenway where people can bicycle and go for a jog, and then you have the highway, which is protected by all those elements that I've mentioned. So I thought this was a nice closing image. So with that, I will encourage you to download your very own copy of the implementation guide. Since my typical audience is transportation practitioners, and this webinar will probably reach more coastal resource managers. What I would encourage you to do is for when you want to go and partner with transportation agencies on developing living shorelines or nature-based solutions, you can use this guide to your advantage because you can show your transportation agency partner, yes, this applies to you as well. Here's the guidance that Federal Highway Administration has produced. So I hope you will find it helpful. And I would look forward to answering questions and engaging in dialogue. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much, Tina. This has been really fascinating. And with that, I'd like to open the floor if anyone has any questions. Again, if you look at the webinar panel on the right side of your screen, there should be a question section there. You can go ahead and type something in, and if you would like to speak directly, please raise your hand, and I can give you the floor. I wanted to start off with one question, Tina. Could you talk a bit about, you said that there were some cost analyses in there, and one of the selling points that is being raised more and more with these living shorelines is not just the initial construction costs, but how maintenance costs over time can vary between a traditional versus a living shoreline. Can you talk a bit more about how you address that in this document?
Yes, so the main cost analysis was just on the upfront costs. We did include maintenance over time costs in the discussion and in that benefits and costs chapter. However, what we found is that there wasn't as much information as we would have liked in the literature. So we wanted to be able to provide more definitive information, but in the end, the only thing that we could do is summarize what we found in the literature.
Sure, of course. Have you found that to be something people are asking more about or are curious about? Is long-term maintenance something that transportation agencies do a good job of factoring into their budgets? Is that a selling point?
Well, it's something that transportation agencies are concerned about. So at the peer exchanges, we heard that they were worried about doing maintenance over time. They might not know how to maintain a marsh. Now, that said, they do have people in their environmental office who may have done work on compensatory mitigation. So they may have some experience, but then there's also good opportunity to partner with others. So for instance, for the Delaware Department of Transportation pilot, where they did an analysis of a living shoreline to protect sections of Coastal Highway Route 1 through the beach resorts there.
Mhm.
They actually got funding for that project, and it's under construction right now, which is very exciting. And they have an arrangement with the Center for Inland Bays, which is a nonprofit organization in Delaware, to do maintenance of the oyster reef. So that's good that they can, you know, kind of hand that off, since it's not their area of expertise. So partnerships and maintenance can be very helpful.
Indeed. Okay, great. We've got one question here. Bill, I should have unmuted you now. Do you want to go ahead and ask a question?
Sure. Hi, this is Bill Shadle from the Nature Conservancy in New Jersey. And thanks for your presentation. I'm definitely looking forward now much more to looking at your document. I was wondering regarding costs, one thing we're hearing, or our impression is, I suppose, with nature-based solutions, living shorelines in particular, but nature-based solutions broadly that are yet to be mainstream. In contrast, like in New Jersey, beach replenishment is mainstream. There's a process for that. There's a funding stream. Everything sort of works like clockwork. But things that are newer, living shorelines, beneficial use for marsh restoration and other things are yet to be mainstream. And so the costs look to be pretty high for design, for even permitting, because regulators are less comfortable with them. They might require more information than they would normally than with things they are comfortable with, like a rock revetment or bulkhead. And I was just curious how that resonates with you. Are you hearing, does that make sense to you? Are you hearing similar things? Is it that we simply need more demonstrations to make the broader community comfortable that these things can become, again, more mainstream, so that they're essentially as easy to do or no more difficult to do than traditional features and structures?
Yeah, what you're saying very much resonates with me and with things that I heard while working on this project. I think there's been a lot of great work in the community at large developing trainings for contractors to introduce them to living shorelines techniques. I'm hopeful that as we're providing this implementation guide to transportation agencies, that we'll see more transportation agencies adopting these practices, and it can be mainstreamed as we go forward.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Thanks. I appreciate that.
Okay, are there any other questions?
I have one, Hillary, if I may. It's Suzanne.
Please, go right ahead.
Hi, Tina. That was great. So one of the questions that I have, and you may have touched on it, and if I missed it, I'm sorry. So, what sort of outreach and training is going to go on? Like, this is a fantastic resource, but I know there were some listening sessions. Are there going to be sort of more in-depth outreach or workshops or webinars or whatever it is, kind of going deeper into the community?
Mm-hmm. Well, we do have a launch plan, and what we've had so far is distribution to the field. We sent out a formal memo to our division offices in all of the states, highlighting the guidance and encouraging them to share it with their state and local partners. We also did a national webinar a couple of weeks ago that was very well attended. We've been presenting this information at various conferences. We've talked with NOAA about potentially doing some online translation of this material as part of their Digital Coast platform, but that's just in initial stages of conversation. There's always more that could be done. That's what we're doing so far, and would be interested in ideas for additional opportunities.
Great, thank you.
Okay, and with that, if I may, Tina, thank you so much for your time and this wonderful presentation. And again, folks, if you need to get the link there to the document, it should still be on your screen. And at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Farah Alami. If you'd like to give us a little introduction to the training that you did and what you'll be talking about next month.
Yes, thank you, Tina. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, great, great. This is Sarah Elami, and I'm with the Florida Fish and Wildlife Conservation Commission. And we have been working on a training program for marine contractors to teach them about living shorelines. And not just my agency, but many other agencies and nonprofit groups and private consultants and several other groups and organizations around the state have been working towards this goal of a marine contractor training program. And our overall goal is to increase the number of marine contractors who can assess dynamic eroding shorelines and provide solutions featuring living shorelines where feasible. So, to that end, we developed a 2-day training program, and we delivered the course for the first time in the Tampa Bay area in St. Petersburg in October. And we had great success. We had, as a matter of fact, we had more people wanting to sign up than we actually had room for in the course. So that was a wonderful thing. And the course went very, very well. And next week, or I'm sorry, next month, I'll be giving more details about the course and the success and how we are planning to move forward in the future with delivering this course throughout the state in all the regions at least once and hopefully more than that over the coming year. So this is a statewide program that we hope will can be a model for other states as well. And I'll be happy to talk with you all about it next month.
Terrific. Thank you so much. We are very much looking forward to it. Again, folks, that will be on December 18th, which is again the third Wednesday of the month at 1 p.m. And we will have announcements going out about that this coming month. So we look forward to seeing all of you then. Thanks again to Tina Hodges and to Farah Alami. And with that, we'll wrap it up. So talk to you next month.